Hello everybody, today we have a spicy addition to our Reddit series. We have r/ProRevenge. Hope you enjoy. Alright, our first story is Hippity Hoppity, you damaged my property. Bippity boppity, I'm calling the coppity. Bippity boppity boo, they're taking your kids too. That's a great title name. Apologize in advance for the length, TLDR at the end. This happened shortly after college. My mom is a retired disabled woman who now owns her house in a quiet residential cul-de-sac. She has lived there longer than anyone else. Her neighborhood has designated parking spaces at the end of the cul-de-sac, all with the addresses of each house painted in the parking space. My mom doesn't get out much, so I use her designated parking space. At the time, we lived in the same city and I visited her weekly to bring groceries, fix broken things, cook for her, etc. My mom parked her car in the backyard of her house since she went out so little. Mom kept busy by gardening or baking/buying cookies for the children on the street. Mom's neighbor, Ivy, never parked well. Whenever I stopped by, her car was always parked so close to my car that I had to park on the curb. I wouldn't have cared about Ivy's piss poor parking but for two things. She had 4 or 5 kids and had parties almost every weekend, leaving trash in Mom's yard. 2. I love my car. A 2006 metallic ice blue Dodge Challenger Hellcat, the first car I had ever purchased brand new. I washed that car once a week, detailed the interior, and had rules against eating, drinking, or even leaving trash in my car. It was my pride and joy. Mom had called the police throughout Ivy's residence because of the parties. Ivy's guests would fill up the cul-de-sac with their cars, obstructing traffic, and get into loud, drunk fights at and after midnight. I often found empty beer bottles, empty condom wrappers, cigarette butts, and empty crack baggies on the fence between the properties, mostly on Ivy's side of the fence. This is all important information. On Saturday, while having dinner at Mom's house, I heard a loud crash and my car alarm went off. I ran outside to see Ivy's older model Honda Accord back out of her parking space and speed down the street. Ivy's Accord had a dent from the front bumper to her door, and the headlight had popped out. I approached my Challenger with trepidation and screamed in anguish at what I saw. My car, my beautiful 3-week-old car with less than 500 miles on it, had a dent stretching from the passenger door to the front bumper, and the right front wheel was tilted at a 30-degree angle. I was livid and in anguish as I called the police, filed an online claim with my insurance, and arranged for a tow truck to take my damaged car to the dealership. The estimated cost of repairs came up to $3,400 USD. Total cost of repairs was eventually $6,500 USD. I had a low insurance deductible $100 USD, but my car was parked and Ivy owed for the damages. For 2 weeks, I knocked on Ivy's door or waited for her to come home. She stopped driving her damaged Accord and either rented or borrowed a Ford Fusion. When she was home, she didn't answer the door. When she wasn't, she stayed away until my rental car, a Dodge Charger, left Mom's parking space. I left a note on Ivy's door for her to call me, but only received harassing calls from restricted phone numbers or people blaring air horns in my ear when I answered. The revenge. About 2 weeks after the accident, Ivy's children came to Mom's house for some cookies. I noticed that 2 of them had bruises around their eyes. If Ivy hadn't hit my car, I still would have done what I did, but maybe not as underhandedly. I had Mom take pictures with and of the children, but waited until the next party to strike. Ivy had a party that night or the night after. Mom called me to let me know, and I installed an app on my phone that gave me a fake phone number. I called 911 and reported the party. There's a loud party at 1007 Mountain Drive, and I'm worried because the children are around all these drunk adults. Please hurry. Mom called to let me know the police had arrived. I drove to her house, stopping by the grocery store first, so that appeared to be the reason, and saw Ivy and her boyfriend Bane already sitting in the back of a SWAT car. From a news broadcast that night, I found out that Bane had warrants out for his arrest. Initially, the charges were disorderly conduct and disturbing the peace. However, Mom turned over the photos of the children, anonymously mailing them to the post office with Ivy's address and name as the return address. Less than a week later, Ivy and Bane were charged with child abuse charges. I think Bane was charged with more severe charges as well for abusing Ivy's daughter. Either way, the children ended up in foster care, and Ivy and Bane ended up in prison. Jesus Christ, that's pretty malicious. But I mean, I guess. I mean, getting someone's children taken away because they scratched up their car. Granted, I mean, they were pretty messy and annoying neighbors, but taking someone's kids away, that's maybe a little bit too much revenge, but it's good revenge. Ex-girlfriend was a scammer, so I put her in the slammer. Bippity boppity boo, I destroyed her family too. What's up with these all epic titles? Sorry about the length, but you need the details. TLDR at the end. Around the time that I got my first full-time job and finished college, I decided that I was ready to venture out and start dating. I had heard about the amazing app through a few of my coworkers, a little thing called Tinder, so I decided to give it a shot. After about a week in the app, I finally matched with a woman who we'll call Talia. Talia lived in a different city than I did, but the day we matched, she said she was visiting a cousin. We messaged through the app, and after verifying she was real through her Facebook and Instagram profiles, we exchanged phone numbers. She said she was employed, full-time, had an apartment and her own car, and was somehow still single. We talked for about 2 weeks on the phone, always at night after my shift at work, before we finally had a chance to meet when our schedules matched up. I drove my beat-up 1996 Honda Civic to her town, spent that Friday night, I forgot where we ate that night, and in the morning we had breakfast at Waffle House. Talia did have her own apartment. However, she lived next door to her grandmother, who I awkwardly had to meet the next morning. I learned from Talia that her car was actually in her grandmother's name, and her apartment was in the name of her cousin. She went so far to show me the family portraits with her cousin, to talk about her abusive ex, and even shared with me how her laundry room was embarrassingly infested with flies and roaches. We officially changed our social media to dating that day. Keep in mind, this is the first relationship in almost 4 years, so I was excited. A scam. Talia also told me that day that she had been fired from work about a week earlier, but was too embarrassed to tell me. I asked her how she had kept up her bills, and she said that her grandma and dad had been helping her. Talia asked if I could help her make her car payment, which was due that weekend. I refused. She then explained that she could get a payday loan, which is banned in our state, and could put it into my checking account. I felt uneasy about it and asked if there was another way she could get the loan. Talia said that she couldn't use her grandma or dad's account because they had burned her in the past. I thought it was weird, but she started crying, so I called my bank, where I had an account since high school graduation, and opened a linked checking account. I gave Talia the new checking account number and routing number. Talia contacted a payday loan company in Alabama, and by Sunday morning, she had the funds in my linked checking account. Per our agreement, I gave her the money. Talia promised to repay the loans within 2 weeks. I had my reservations, but went home and back to work one day. Talia called me on Wednesday and said she had a new job. I asked if she had the payday loan squared away with her first paycheck. She said she did, but I still got charged $47 2 weeks after she set up the loan. I called my bank, called Terry to verify the loan was going through her, and terminated the charge from her payday loan as I was not the signed person. Talia and I agreed to meet Memorial Day weekend 2 weeks later. She stated that her dad had given her a check for the entire loan amount, $1,800, and that she would deposit it into my bank near her. Like a fool, I let her deposit the check right before Memorial Day weekend. 2 weeks later, the payday loan company charged another $47, plus penalty fees and another $47. The $1,800 check bounced. Talia stopped answering her calls and blocked me on everything. I called my bank and informed them that I was a victim of fraud. Within hours, my main checking account, into which my paycheck had gone, my savings account with $800 saved for a new car, and the new checking account was closed. My best friend from college, we'll call him Clark, found Talia, had 2 of every social media account. The one she shared with me and the one on which she had a boyfriend. Her cousin from her family photos was actually her boyfriend since high school. Talia was 22, 23. Her boyfriend, we'll call him Jason, was in prison, but from their social media posts, she was visiting him once a month minimum and had plans to marry him. Jesus Christ. I spent days trying to get back my accounts and my money. One of the representatives from my bank and Clark and my mom advised that I should press charges for fraud. My bank mailed me a copy of the bounce check for criminal investigation purposes, and it showed Jason's name and not Talia's father's name as the owner of the check. That's when I decided to get revenge. The revenge. As mentioned before, Talia's apartment had a minor infestation of roaches and flies in her laundry room. While I went through legal agencies to pursue pressing charges of forgery on the check, fraud, etc., I found the name and phone number of Talia's apartment complex. I left a message for the apartment complex management that Talia and her grandmother both had filled the apartments. Within a week, Clark showed me that Talia had posted a request for temporary housing for her and her grandma, since her parents wouldn't let her move in. Talia's payday loan company began calling me, as Talia had given them my phone number instead of hers, and they had not yet received payments yet. I was still reviewing my legal options at the time. One day, I answered and notified the rep that Talia had fraudulently used my checking account. The rep who called me transferred me to their legal department, who were very interested. It turned out that Talia's grandma and her father owed to the payday loan company. It wasn't a lot separately, but the payday loan company had enough evidence with my claim that Talia was the ringleader using her family's accounts. I turned over my evidence, including Talia's text messages promising to pay, the copy of the bounce check, and my bank statements. By the end of the year, Talia was arrested on several charges. Her grandma and father were also arrested, but took pleas for lesser charges in exchange for turning over evidence on her. I didn't have to testify at the trial, but I kept informed. Talia's grandmother had a minor heart attack when she was arrested and had a more significant one during the trial. I'm not sure if her grandma lived or died after the trial. Despite this, Talia went to prison for multiple counts and will serve more than a decade behind bars. Good job, soldier. You've done a good job. Talia, you've won. You caught the big dub. I don't know what I'm saying. My friend's ex-wife gets his family's business shut down and burns their lives to the ground. Not what you may think. Sorry for the somewhat misleading title, but I couldn't resist. This story isn't about me, but two people I'm friends with. I'll call one Ray and one Justin. I'm posting this with Justin's permission, and he'll probably be reading this thread. Some background. Ray and Justin grew up in an extremely restrictive, insular religious community that borders on being a cult. They both read a lot from a young age, even though reading outside of the religion's material was discouraged, and so both of them grew increasingly skeptical and dissatisfied with their environment due to having this peek into the outside world. In high school, this shared mindset brought them together, and they started secretly dating. For context, dating was absolutely restricted verbatim in this religious community. You went straight from single to married with zero in between. So when Justin and Ray's parents caught them dating, they forced them to get married. To be clear, it wasn't even like they were having sex. They basically were driving around together and holding hands in the downtown square where all the kids hung out. Very tame, sheltered kid stuff. Ray and Justin started living together as husband and wife, but unfortunately for their families, putting those two together doubled their resiliency, and together they cooked up a plan to get out. They set up a secret bank account at a bank outside the religious community's influence. Since their families had access to the accounts, and everyone who worked at the main bank was also in the same community, and gossiped about everyone's financial transactions, they started squirreling away money in small amounts the family wouldn't question would be missing from their paychecks. When they were 20, they finally had enough money to start over, and they got out. They basically left their house in the dead of night with nothing but what could fit in their car, and uprooted to live across the country. Then, Justin had a bad accident, a really bad accident. He was on his bike and a car blew through a stop sign without slowing down and plowed right into him. He had to be rushed to the hospital and landed in the ICU. Ray was his emergency contact, and I was with her and some other friends when she got the call. I immediately drove her to the hospital with a couple of other people, and she was melting down, understandably. The hospital staff wouldn't let us all in when we got there, but they let Ray in. She came up periodically to let us know what was going on. Justin wasn't unconscious, but he was totally out of it and didn't seem to know she was there. Probably from the painkillers, but she was convinced he had permanent debilitating brain damage, and basically the group of us were soothing her and reassuring her it would be fine. A friend of ours who worked at the hospital as an MRI tech was also stopping by when she could on her breaks and calming down Ray. We'd been there all night and part of the day at this point, and the medical staff was giving us reason to be hopeful. But things got worse. To this day, no one knows how they found out, but 14 hours after Justin's accident, his parents, uncles, and grandfather showed up. They immediately had all of us removed from the ICU, Ray included. Unfortunately, as his ex-wife, she was no longer his legal next of kin and had no rights against his blood family. At this point, she was absolutely hysterical and inconsolable. She was convinced Justin's family would hurt him. I'm ashamed to say all three of us that were there with her thought she was overreacting. We all knew Ray and Justin had left a messed up situation, but it wasn't like his own family would do anything to impede his recovery. She was getting angry with us for trying to calm her down, and tried to explain that according to their religion, she and Justin deserved punishment from God, and only the greatest suffering could prompt repenting and redemption. She had their families embrace this thinking and wanted them to suffer, because it would prove that they did the wrong thing by leaving, and suffering would drive them back to the fold. She said as long as Justin was with his family, he wouldn't be safe. That's insane. Our friend, who worked for the hospital, came and found Ray at that point. She made swear up and down she wouldn't tell anyone she told her this, because she could get in deep trouble for releasing privileged information to someone unauthorized. But she'd caught wind that Justin's parents were aggressively demanding the hospital release him to their care, and they were involving lawyers. The hospital was currently refusing because Justin wasn't stable enough to leave, but our friend warned Ray that as soon as Justin got to be stable, or the lawyers scared the hospital enough, it's possible the parents would be able to take Justin. This shocked the rest of us, realizing his parents were not only willing to remove Justin from the hospital that had saved his life and the condition he was still in, but were actively trying to do it, made us really get for the first time why Ray was going out of her head with fear. At this point, Ray snapped into do or die mode, convinced that Justin was about to literally die if she didn't act. she decided she would do everything in her power to start a fire at home so that Justin's family would want to run back to put it out. And this wasn't too hard because she had a lot of dirt on the whole community she came from. Like a madwoman, she started blowing the whistle all over Justin's family. She called the IRS's fraud hotline and detailed all the ways that the family business was committing tax fraud. She submitted an ATF tip about how that same family business was illegally selling firearms without a license and without following any of the proper protocols, and was knowingly selling guns to convicted felons. She reported one of Justin's uncles for owning several guns as a convicted felon. She also reported Justin's mom unlicensed daycare business, which was apparently extremely shady, including having over 30 children packed into one house, with Justin's mom as the only adult, and many of the childcare duties being farmed up to Justin's 12 to 14-year-old sisters. She called CPS on Justin's uncles and his parents for keeping their children out of school, and for physical abuse in one uncle's case. In all of the reports, she provided extensive details. She finished her calls and emails, and then she waited. We all waited for several hours, and nothing happened. Then, miraculously, Justin became lucid enough to understand what was going on and make his own decisions, and he kicked his family out again. From there began a slow but steady path to recovery. In all the relief and excitement to see Justin on the mend, we'd almost forgotten about Ray's campaign of desperation until a couple of weeks later when the screaming voicemails started pouring into both of them. First, the business was being investigated by the IRS. Then it was being investigated for illegal firearm stealing. Then the daycare was getting investigated. At first, Ray felt a little guilty, but then she was like, you know what, no regrets. They would have killed Justin. From what they've been able to piece together in the year and a half since this happened, the business has gone under and the daycare is shuttered. The uncle is 6 months into a new 5-year prison sentence for firearm possession. CPS investigated, which scared the shit out of the family, but nothing really came of it, which is especially sad in the case of the cousins being physically abused. That said, the parents are now too scared to keep the kids home from school, and with the unlicensed daycare shut down, the mom's not exploiting her daughter's labor anyways, so she has no incentive to keep them home. So Justin's little siblings are at least getting their education. Justin and Ray are both happy and thriving. Justin, unfortunately, will never fully recover from the accident. He has some permanent neurological damage that results in tremors, but he's pumped to be alive. He can work a full-time job, he can still be pretty physically active, and as far as I'm concerned, he wins. This is crazy. That's insane. Who tries to kill their own son because he left their family because they were doing something wrong? That's insane. Imagine trying to kill your own son because he had a mind of his own. That's so controlling. That's so unnecessary. Well, good job on Justin and Ray for, mainly Ray for just winning. Yeah. Alright. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. See ya.